Hello and welcome to our Godly Play session today. I'm Ellie. It's good to be able to share with you. Let's just take a moment or two to get ready. This is the desert. Many wonderful and important things happened in the desert. And so we need to know what it's like. The desert can be a difficult and dangerous place. There's not much water in the desert, so it can be hard to find anything to drink. Without water, we die. Not a lot grows in the desert, so there's not much to eat. During the day, the sun shines down and scorches your skin. But at night, it's cold. The wind blows in the desert. It stings your skin. People have to wear many clothes to protect them in the desert from the sun and the cold and from the wind. When the wind blows, the desert changes, and so it's easy to get lost in the desert. The desert can be a difficult and dangerous place. People only go there if they have to. After the flood, all the creatures went back out into the four corners of the earth, and they began to fill it with life again. They settled near the rivers. And the people began to settle in villages first, and then in towns and cities. One of the most ancient and greatest of those cities was the city of Ur. The people of Ur believed that there were many different gods. There was a god for each rock and each flower, a god for the land and for the water and for the sky. The whole place was alive with gods. But there was one family who believed that all of God was in every place. They didn't know that yet, but that's what they believed. Abram and Sarai were part of that family. When it was time to move on again, they weren't sure if God would be in the new place. So they didn't know what the new place would be like. They set off with their sheep and their donkeys. Even the old people and the children went too. At night, they slept in their tents. And during the day, they walked and followed the great Euphrates River. It showed them the way, and it gave them and their animals something to drink. It was a long, long way. Finally, they saw people coming out from Haran. They knew they would be nearly there. And then they were there. Sometimes Abram would go out onto the edge of the desert and look out across the sand. And Abram came so close to God, and God came so close to Abram that Abram knew what God wanted him to do. God wanted them to move on again. And so Abram and Sarai did as God asked. And they set off to the west of Haran and walked towards Canaan with their donkeys and their sheep and many helpers. Abram's brother's son, Lot, also went with them. This time, there was no river to guide them or to provide water for them to drink. And then they came to Shechem. And Abram climbed up a hill and prayed to God. God was there. Abram built an altar to mark the place. And then they set off again. And they came close to Bethel. And Abram prayed there too. And God was there also. And so Abram built another altar. God was not just here or there. All of God was everywhere. And then they continued. They walked out towards Hebron. And they made their home near the oaks of Mamre. God brought Abram out. And Abram looked up at the stars in the sky. And Abram came so close to God, and God came so close to Abram that Abram knew what God was saying to him. You will be the father of a great family, and Sarai will be the mother. This family will outnumber the stars in the sky and the grains of sand in the desert. Abram laughed. They were really old. God's promise did not seem possible. But God said to change their names anyway. And so Abram became Abraham. And Sarai, she became Sarah. One day, 3 strangers came out across the desert. Abraham was sitting outside the tent and he invited them in. Sarah prepared 3 measures of flour, which is a lot, and she gave them bread and meat to eat and some milk and water to drink, as is the custom. The strangers told Abraham that he and Sarah were going to have a son. Abraham laughed again. And Sarah, who was outside the tent, she laughed too. They were just too old. The strangers went on their way. And do you know what happened? Abraham and Sarah had a son. And they laughed. And they called their baby Laughter, which in their language is Isaac. When the boy was all grown up, Sarah was very old and she died. And they buried her in the caves near the oaks. Abraham was very sad. He was lonely. He missed Sarah very much. But there was still one more thing that he had to do. He sent his most trusted helper back out across the desert, back to where their family had come from. And one night, as the helper stopped beside a well, Rebecca came and gave him a drink of water and helped him give water to all his animals. Rebecca was as full of courage as she was kind. And then she invited him back to her family. And the helper told them all about Abraham and Sarah and the great family. And Rebecca decided she wanted to be part of that great family too. And so they went back through the desert, past Shechem, past Bethel. And when Isaac saw them coming, he came out to meet them. And Isaac and Rebekah were married. Now, Abraham was very old and full of years, and he died. And they buried him alongside Sarah near the oaks of Mamre. And then Isaac and Rebekah had children. And their children had children. And their children had children. And this went on for thousands and thousands of years until your grandmother and grandfather had children. And your mother and father had children. And now you are part of that great family that outnumbers the stars in the sky and the grains of sand in the desert. And so I wonder, which part of this story do you like the best? Which part do you like the best? I wonder which part of this story is the most important. I wonder where you are in this story. Which part of this story is about you? I wonder if there's any part of this story that we could take away and yet still have all the story that we need. I encourage you to spend some time wondering about this story and some time responding. You might want to go out one night on a clear night and look out into the stars like Abram did. You might want to think of some of the difficult places that you've been. Or maybe you could be creative, get your arts and crafts materials out and think about the journey of your life. Maybe you want to think about your family. You could trace your family tree. I wonder how far you can go back. Spend some time wondering and responding about this story. And as we finish, I pray that you and those you love know that God, all of God, who is everywhere, is always with you. Amen.